friends. Today is a special day called Groundhog's Day. So I'm going to read you a book all about Groundhog's Day. And it's called Wake Up, Groundhog. It's written by Susan Hill and illustrated by Jeffrey L. Ebler. And it's about the Punxsutawney Phyllis. Phyllis was not like other groundhogs. She liked to get up in February instead of March. She liked being outdoors instead of indoors. When spring rains soaked the earth, everyone was huddled in the burrow. Phyllis splashed in puddles. "You're sopping wet," Mother scolded. "I like the way the mud feels between my toes," said Phyllis. Her mother shook her head and said to Phyllis's father, "That's Phyllis." When the stream water rushed icy cold, fierce between the banks, Phyllis went wading. "You'll catch a cold," Aunt Patsy warned. Phyllis's mother just shook her head. "That's Phyllis." When the August sun beat down, turning the meadow all brown, Phyllis picked blackberries, warm and sweet. "You will bake in this heat," said Aunt Patsy. Guess what Phyllis's mother said? "That's Phyllis." "When I grow up," Phyllis said, "I want to be the Punxsutawney Phil." "Don't be silly, dear. The Punxsutawney Phil is a fellow." The other grown-ups laughed, but Phyllis knew she could do it, even if no one else took her seriously. And then one February morning, Phyllis woke up early. She crawled out of bed and crept out of the tunnel. The first light of the morning shone at the mouth of the groundhog hole. From the big pine trees came a steady drip, drip, drip of snow. Kind of like today. Look outside, it's snowing. Running water whispered in the brook and the air was sharp, but something about it had changed. Spring was coming early. Look at her face. What does she think about spring coming early and the sun shining on her? She skipped back to the tunnel to wait for Uncle Phil to wake up and make his prediction. "Phyllis, would you quit wiggling?" complained Phil Jr. "Yeah, Phyllis," said Pete. "Some of us are trying to sleep." "How do you sleep when spring is coming? It's in the air." "Only Phyllis would think spring is coming in the middle of winter," he said. "It's not the middle of winter. It's Groundhog's Day." But Phil Jr. and Pete were already going back to sleep. Pretty soon, Aunt Sassy got up and tried to wake up Phil. She shook him and tugged his whiskers. She shouted in his ear, and everyone else in the burrow woke up. But Uncle Phil kept on snoring. "What's all the ruckus?" said Grandfather Groundhog. "It's Groundhog's Day," said Aunt Sassy, "and Phil's still asleep. I'm afraid he's getting too old for the job." "I'll do it," Phyllis said eagerly. Everyone laughed. "Punxsutawney Phil has never been a girl," said Pete. "And it never will be," Phil Jr. said. "Nobody's going to get the job until Phil gives it up," said Aunt Sassy. "Now, how are we going to wake him?" "Dump snow on him," Phyllis suggested. "Good idea," Aunt Sassy said. And guess what? It worked. They dumped snow on him. Uncle Phil grumbled. "It's time to get up," said Aunt Sassy. "It's Groundhog's Day." "I'm sleepy," Uncle Phil complained. "If you're too tired, I'd be happy to do the job for you," said Phyllis. "Huh," said Uncle Phil. "Not just anyone can be the Punxsutawney Phil." "I'm not just anyone," said Phyllis. "Is your name Phil?" said Uncle Phil. "No," Phyllis admitted, "but Punxsutawney Phil's real name isn't always Phil." "Yes," well, grumbled Uncle Phil. "But were you born on Groundhog's Day?" "I was born the day after Groundhog's Day." "Not good enough," said Uncle Phil. "Besides, you're a girl. When the time comes, one of those fellows will fit the ticket." Phil Jr. and Pete smirked. "They can't even feel that spring is in the air, Uncle Phil." "We never have an early spring," said Uncle Phil. "In all my years as Punxsutawney Phil, it never happened once." "It's going to happen this year," Phyllis said stubbornly. That's our Phyllis, said Mom. And Phyllis wished people would stop saying that. How do you think that makes her feel when they say that? Do you think that makes her feel happy or maybe a little sad? Phyllis, come home with me and see what the world looks like in February. Then you'll know I'm right. Phyllis couldn't believe her luck. They walked up the long tunnel and emerged into the light, and Uncle Phil sat up and put his hands and he sniffed the air. Just as I thought, 6 more weeks of winter. Who's going to be right, Uncle Phil or Phyllis? Early spring, insisted Phyllis. Look at all the snow. Feel the cold, said Uncle Phil. The snow is melting. The water is running in the brook. Uncle Phil tilted his head and listened. Ooh, so it is. I don't hear as well as I used to. This is the water running in the brook. The chickadees are singing a spring song, said Phyllis. I never hear the chickadees on Groundhog's Day, said Uncle Phil. And look, Uncle Phil, no shadow. My eyes aren't as clear as they used to be, said Uncle Phil. And don't you smell the sweetness of spring in the air? Uncle Phil sniffed. Just a hint. And there's something else, said Phyllis, and she finally figured it out what had felt different about the air all morning. Feel the wind? It's coming from the west. It's a spring zephyr. Well, I'll be jiggered, Uncle Phil said. What do you think that means? Phyllis was right, Uncle Phil announced. When they returned to the burrow, we are going to have an early spring. It's time for me to retire. But who will be the next Punxsutawney Phil? Aunt Patsy asked. I will, Phil Jr. No, I will, said Pete. Sorry, boys, said Uncle Phil. You missed all of the signs, too. You can't mean, said Phil Jr. Yes, yes, boys. This time, the best Phil for the job is Phyllis. But what about the rules? Yay! If Mother Nature can bend the rules once in a while, said Uncle Phil, we can too. Phyllis heard the water in the brook and the song of the birds, and she saw that there was no shadow, and she felt the spring zephyr. That's Phyllis, said Mother proudly. Phyllis grinned and said, Punxsutawney Phyllis. She gets the hat. The end.